Behavioural economics on a post-it 15. Mental accounting. In standard rational choice theory, standard economics, it's often assumed that people should attach a particular, subjective value, particular utility or a subjective value to a money amount, and that utility, that subjective value, should be fixed, irrespective of where you're thinking about spending that monetary amount, right? But what's been observed is that people seem to have or place different subjective values upon the same monetary amounts depending on where those money amounts are going to be used, and that they put their money into different sort of accounts, mental accounts, if you like, mental accounting, and they don't consider that trading those monies between those different accounts is really sort of trading like for like. All right, so I'll try to illustrate this with an example that's used in the literature quite a bit. And again, it is an example, I suppose, that most of you could relate to some extent. So just consider scenario number 1 here at the top. You're thinking about going to the cinema, and you know that 2 different cinemas are playing the exact same film that you want to see at the same time. Everything about it is the same. The only difference is that cinema A charges £15 per ticket. You know that they charge £15 per ticket, and cinema B charges £20 per ticket. And let's just assume that cinema A is, say, it takes you 10 minutes extra, 10 minutes of additional time to get to, over and above going to cinema B. So the question would be for you, perhaps, would you be willing to spend that extra time travelling, that extra 10 minutes travelling, in order to go to cinema A rather than cinema B, in order to save the £5 on the ticket price, £15 rather than £20? You can sort of think about whether you would do that yourselves. I guess the assumption is that a significant number of people, perhaps the majority, perhaps most people, would be willing to travel the extra 10 minutes to save the £5 on the ticket price. Okay. Now consider scenario 2 here. You want to buy a new car, and you know that 2 showrooms are selling the exact car that you want to buy. The same colour, everything about them is the same. The only difference is that showroom A, are charging £19,995, and showroom B are charging £20,000 for that same car, right? Now the question here is, knowing this, and the other difference is that showroom A would take you 10 minutes longer to get to than getting to showroom B. So the question for you would be, would you be willing to expend that extra 10 minutes in travel time specifically to save the £5 by going to showroom A than by going to showroom B, right? Now, because these are large amounts of money, it's assumed that fewer people, maybe far fewer people, would be willing to expend the extra 10 minutes in travel time in order to save £5. Far fewer people would be willing to do that in scenario 2 than they would in scenario 1, right? Now, from this, it's often assumed, as I said at the beginning, that the £5 difference is meaningful, it seems, between these two. There is a meaningful difference in the £5 that you could save between these 2 different scenarios, if I can get my words out correctly there. And that, therefore, this violates the assumption that I talked about at the beginning, the generally held assumption that in standard rational choice theory, £5 should have a consistent, value, subjective value placed upon it, irrespective of where it's spent, right? Now, I just wanted to say one thing that sort of pops into my head about this. Almost, I don't know, it's something that I've been thinking about in terms of standard economic theory, and it might be sort of slightly in defense of standard economic theory in this context. So if you remember, I've talked about in previous post-its, I think, in standard economic theory, if you have a utility, say, or a subjective value, and if you have money here, just say money there. In standard economic theory, it is assumed that people have a decline in marginal utility curve, right? So if you were thinking about the difference between, well, the cinema price ticket, say it was £15 and £20, you'd have a difference in utility that was quite steep between those two. Apologies for the lack of straight lines, but you get the picture, right? But if you were thinking about the difference between 19,995 and £20,000, the difference in utility, if you drew across there, you can see would be much smaller, right, than the difference in utility for relatively low monetary amounts, where there's a difference in monetary outcome that is identical, £5 in both instances. So I don't know whether I'm barking up the wrong tree there, but I'm thinking that it may be the case that within these scenarios, it is possible to launch sort of a standard economic theory or a standard rational choice theory defense of what might be going on in people's choices here. But I'll leave that point hanging. The basic point that's been made by behavioural economists that, according to rational choice theory, according to that line of argument, identical monetary amounts should have an identical utility attached to them, irrespective of where they're spent, is very often violated when you present people with these types of scenarios. So there we have it, behavioural economics on a post-it number 15, mental accounting.